What's going on? It's Tim from Turbine Orbital. The time has come. What's going on, everybody? Tim from Turbine Orbital. So, this is going to be a little bit of a longer video. It's a detailed build. So a lot has gone into this particular install. A lot of body modifications, a lot going on in the crystal chamber. There's a lot going on in the chassis. So I would like to take a chance to go over all of that. This is an install commission for a Korbanth SK Rogue Apprentice, SKIG. I mean, there's so many ways to call this hilt what it is, but this is the exposed crystal star killer from Korbanth. This is the third version that Korbanth has released. There are some differences between the second version and the third version. Some very big differences, in my opinion. Some of them confusing. I'm not sure why Korbanth decided to go with a longer grip and excluded the copper from the grip itself. But yeah, this hilt has a special place in my heart. One of my first very intricate delves into hilt customization was the SKv3 from Korbanth. And this particular build, I haven't done that many of. I don't always take them on because they are very time consuming. There's a lot going on. There's a lot that needs to be done. So I don't always do this, but this was for a client that really, really wanted it. So I said, why not? I haven't done one in a while. So we're going to talk about the chassis. I will talk about the body mods that I did to the hilt. We'll talk about the crystal chamber a little bit, and then we'll do a demo and be on our way, right? So let's talk about the chassis. Here is the chassis. So with my previous SK installs, I've done a static chassis, obviously. But with this one, the client really, really wanted a marble in a secondary crystal, if you will. So this chassis has an exposed marble chamber up top here. I'm having a hard time talking because it's the payoff with having the longer grip on this version is that you can shove more stuff into the chassis, right? So that's probably the only reason I was able to get away with jamming a marble up top here. And given that the connection that the chassis has to make to the rest of the hilt is such a small nipple, it was really hard doing this. It was just difficult to get wire management and get enough space to fit a decent sized marble in here. Okay. So it was a little difficult. I did go through one or two prototype prints of this particular chassis. So that's why it was a little bit of a process, this one for me. So anyway, battery tray is here. We've got a kill switch up top, plenty of room for a 28mm speaker. This is a 28mm and around front, we've got one Neopixel underneath the marble. I did create a separate mount for the marble as well. Proffie board sits in here, sits right in here. This is where the Proffie board sits. It slides in here. Anyway, so that's pretty much it on the chassis, right? So you'll notice, let's come down to the bottom. So I don't know if you caught this particular chassis towards the end, it gets thinner. The diameter of the chassis gets thinner. This is another strange thing that I noticed with the Korbanth V2. The grip is not the same inner diameter all the way down. So once you get to about here, the internal diameter of the grip steps down more, which I didn't quite understand why they did that. Maybe to allow for threading for the I don't know. But if I recall correctly, I don't believe that's the case for the SKv3. It's the same inner diameter straight through the grip. So that's why there's that indentation there on that chassis, right? So let's talk about some of the body modifications that I did with this particular hilt. Okay, and there's a lot to go over, okay? So we'll start with the grip. Okay, so here's the grip for the SKv3. I'm gonna get so this is the SKv2, and you'll immediately see the differences in the differences in grip length. We're looking at like an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter difference between the V2 and the V3. So longer grip, right? The entire hilt has been weathered. I did some aluminum black on this and then went back with some burnt sienna wash to give it a rusty look. Now on the factory SKv3, there is no copper. Right? It's just aluminum all the way through. So I got some copper plating and cut some copper strips to size, mounted them on the grip, and then went back and weathered that copper as well. That gives it a nice worn look. I think this looks fantastic. I did another one like this with a brass ring. I think it looks really, really good with both. But the copper is more in line with the actual, in-game look of this hilt, right? So making our way up to the top, it's just some more weathered stuff. I've got, more rust. I heat stain all of the steel hardware on this. The client specifically requested that we go with a glass eye from the Graflex Shop. So the client really specifically wanted something similar to my original. So this is my personal SK that I did I feel like this was almost a year ago I did this. It's crazy. So they wanted something similar to that. Exactly the same, honestly. They really wanted that same look, okay? Let's talk about this crystal chamber, all right? So these are two Goth crystal chamber modules. They've been printed in brass from Shapeways. So in order to mount these into the crystal chamber, what I do is I've created some mounts in Fusion, printed them off in high strength resin, and then I mount all of my electronics into those and then secure the Goth crystal chamber on top of those mounts. And that way I'm able to secure everything with a set screw that's behind this shroud, and they just kind of sit in the crystal chamber. Up top, it's the same thing. There's another mount that is up top that is secured to the upper section of the hilt, okay? Along with that, so we've got a Neopixel on the bottom, underneath the bottom crystal. We've got a Neopixel underneath the top crystal. The client saw a video by Jeremy over at CCsabers was doing an SK build around the same time as this one, and the client saw Jeremy's post where Jeremy had a 20 Neopixel array at the bottom of this lower crystal chamber, and the client reached out to me and said, "I want that. I want exactly that." So I reached out to Jeremy and asked him if he was cool with me putting a ring underneath this particular build as well, and he said it was cool with him. So I really appreciate that. It does give underneath this main crystal a really, really unique look. I programmed the blade config to make it look like almost like fire in a way. The client did have some specific requests for the config as well, so I was able to do that with the ring. And let's go up to the top. So these are steel bars that I heat stain and mount in front of the crystal. Korbanth ships with just some regular anodized aluminum rods. There's an orange set and there's a regular bare aluminum set. So these have been replaced with real steel. And up top, we do have two square LEDs. And that was also by request of the client. This is another thing that I put in one of my original builds, just some accent LEDs up top. And that's it, right? So let's talk about the chassis. To get at the chassis, you want to unscrew your grip. Here is the chassis. Okay, so you see, you'll notice that it kind of steps down towards the bottom. That's to allow, it's just a strange internal diameter going on with this grip, right? So here's where the Proffie board sits. Proffie board just sits in that tray, okay? There's the marble up top. Around back, we've got our battery tray and our kill switch, okay? So let's talk about how to use this particular hilt. Spring side. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention. Because this chassis, the nipple on this chassis is so skinny. Okay, this being resin, what I like to do with this particular install, what I've done with my previous SKv3s, there is all thread going through the entire length of the chassis. Okay, so Korbanth does have threaded holes underneath this, like where the chassis meets the rest of the hilt. There's threaded holes that fit like 5/16 inch or 5/16 threaded rod. So I thread my all thread into there on both sides, and I created channels in the chassis itself, so the whole chassis just slides over those rods and secures that way, just to give it a little bit more strength, right? Because it's just such a skinny nipple that goes to the top of the chassis, or the top of the hilt. So anyhow, you take your battery, put it in your battery tray, hit your kill switch.
You hear a lot of common scoring. It looks like you boys have seen a lot of action.
So there's a marble. I've programmed it to heat up. And then we go to green on this particular blade config. All of the crystals do have a cooldown animation. Okay, so once you get your battery in, screw your grip on. Let's come down to the bottom here. Screw your grip on. So there's that crystal chamber. A lot going on in that crystal chamber.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
So to the client did have some specific requests for fonts as well as animations. So every one of those the turbine animation is different for each font, for the most part. I had to carry over some of the configs just to save some room on the SD card, not the SD card, but just to save some room in the config. I carried over some blade styles, right? So let's put a blade in it. So with this particular hilt, where the bunny ears attach to the top of the hilt, there are two screws. The top screw also serves as your blade retention screw. So you want to rest your blade on those PCB pins, then tighten your set screw. And away you go. See what else we got.
Kylo Ren.
There's that crystal chamber. Turbine animation. Loud.
I'm never touching that thing again.
Bird sister.
So to get a color change, you want to hold down aux and tap main, and then you can scroll through colors, and whichever color you find, you want to click aux again, and it'll stick to that color. See what else we got.
I am no Jedi.
So just a great hilt. This hilt's got a special place in my heart. I did that in my first detailed install for this. Really like the way that this hilt came out. I love that turbine ring underneath that lower crystal. I think it looks great. I did also forget to mention it looks like there's two crystals in here. That was actually one quartz point that I broke. The client did request that there's a broken, fractured crystal in that crystal chamber. So lots of requests for this particular install, which is fine. I love a challenge. I love doing something different. So I really love the way that this came out. I can't wait to show the client, and I hope everybody's happy with it. So with that being said, thanks for watching, everybody. I know this was a little bit longer than my usual videos, so thanks for watching. If anyone has any questions about this particular install, please don't be a stranger. And with that being said, may the force be with you always. Thanks for watching, everybody.